Good morning, students. Today we are going to start off with our new chapter, that is stakeholders in commercial organizations. Now, children, let us see who is a stakeholder. What do we mean by a stakeholder? The term stakeholder has developed from the word stake, which means an interest or expected benefit. Stakeholder, children, so means all those individuals, groups and institutions which have stake in the functioning and performance of a commercial organization or a business enterprise. Now, children, who is a stakeholder? A person is said to be a stakeholder when that person has an interest in the organization. The decisions and actions of the organization, children, influence the stakeholders directly or indirectly. Now let us see some key examples of stakeholders. They are creditors, directors, employees, government, agencies, owners, that is shareholders, suppliers and unions. Now children, let us see what are stakeholders. As discussed in the previous slide, people or organizations with special interest in business are termed as stakeholders. This is normally because they are directly affected by the business and how it operates, both now as well as in the future. Now let us see, children, what kind of impact do they have. Stakeholders can have both positive and negative impact on the commercial organizations. Now let us see the positive side. Stakeholders on the positive side provide necessary resources and support to a business. A business enterprise can get finance, labor, raw materials, machinery, etc. from the stakeholders. Now let us see the negative side of the same. On the negative side, children, of the enterprise, when their expectations are not met, in that case, stakeholders play a vital role in determining the success or failure of the business enterprise. Now children, before we proceed further, let us know what is the difference between stakeholders and shareholders. Now stakeholders, children, is a wider term than shareholders. How? Let us see. In a joint stock company, the person and groups who own the shares of the company, they are termed as shareholders. Now, the shareholders contribute the company's share capital and they also take in the risk of any kind of loss. In addition to shareholders, children, customers, creditors, employees, government and other also have a stake in the company. All these are known as stakeholders. So, shareholders are one of the part of the stakeholders. Now, let us see the shareholders. The shareholders is used only in connection with the joint stock company. But, children, kindly note, the stakeholders is used in connection with all the business enterprises, that is sole proprietorship, partnership, joint stock company and so on. Now let us see another distinguish between stakeholders and customers. Now the basis of difference between both of them is number 1. Stakeholders like shareholders and employees have financial stake. Number one on the customer side. Customers do not have a financial stake. So we can say that both of them, they are different on the basis of financial stake. Kindly note children, customer is not a stakeholder as he does not have any stake in the firm. Number 2 point of distinguish. Supply of capital. Stakeholders, they supply financial capital, or we can also say human capital. Customers, they do not supply any kind of capital. They do not give any kind of capital to the firm or organization. Number 3, risk taking. Stakeholders, they take risk of the organization, whereas customers, they do not take any kind of risk in the organization. Number 4, sharing of profits. Stakeholders, they share profit in the form of interest, dividend, wages and salaries, whereas customers, they do not share profit of the commercial organization. So children, this was one of the distinguish between stakeholders and customers. Now children, let us see another distinguish between shareholders and customers as to how shareholders are different from customers. Number 1, basis of difference is stakeholders. Shareholders are stakeholders as discussed earlier also in the previous slides, as they have financial stake in the company, whereas customers are not stakeholders as they do not have a financial stake in the company. Now the next difference is investment. Shareholders, they invest money in the company by buying the shares. On the customer's side, we have customers, they do not invest money in the company. The next basis of difference is dividend. Shareholders receive dividend from the company, whereas customers, they do not receive any kind of dividend from the company. Now children, stakeholders may broadly be classified into 2 categories. They are internal stakeholders and external stakeholders. As you can see here, internal stakeholders are employees, managers, owners, whereas external stakeholders are suppliers, society, government, creditors, shareholders as well as customers. Stakeholders who are involved in business firms from within the organization are known as internal stakeholders. Stakeholders are individuals or organizations that are affected by the consequences and outcomes of the decisions of the organization. Internal stakeholders, children, are those within an organization with an interest in the success and failure of that organization, which may be in the form of reward or punishment. Internal stakeholders, children, include employees, managers, executives, stockholders, and other owners. Now, children, shareholders are owners. They supply capital and have important stake in the company. They assume the risk of business and participate in the profit and overall management of the company. Employers means anyone who offers employment to others. Whereas, now let us take employees. Employees, both managers and workers, they provide mental and physical efforts required for the successful working of an enterprise. Their stake is very crucial for the regular and smooth functioning of the enterprise. In case children, the firm does not succeed, they lose their jobs. If the firm makes very little profit, they get low salaries and wages. External stakeholders. External stakeholders are the ones who contribute to the business enterprise from outside the organization. They consist of creditors, suppliers, competitors, government, local community, media, and the society. External stakeholders, children, can exercise different type of power over an organization, and they can even try to influence its decisions through applying economic or political pressure. External stakeholders, suppliers. Suppliers strive for regular contracts at competitive prices and try avoid long credit period. If we talk about customers, children, customer is always right. They provide business with most of its revenues. If we talk about competitors, they stimulus to the innovation and product development. Government, they avoid unfair practices and ensure health and safety. Now children, let us distinguish between internal stakeholders and external stakeholders. Basis of difference. The first one is position. They operate from inside the organization, whereas external stakeholders, they operate from outside the organization. Now let us look about the role. They actively participate in management and working of the organization, whereas external stakeholders, they do not participate actively in management and working of the organization. Now let us look at the third point, which is constituents. They consist of employees, owners and managers, whereas the external stakeholders, they consist of suppliers, customers, competitors, government and general public. Now children, let us look at the relationship and business. Building relationship is one of the most important areas in business, children. It can be associated with organizational success as well as misconduct. Stakeholders framework helps identify internal as well as external stakeholders. It also helps in monitoring and responding to the needs and values as well as expectations of the stakeholders group. Now children, let us look at the stakeholders interaction model. It shows that the organization is how closely interacting with creditors, competitors, suppliers, financial institutions, trade unions, government, society, the media and the employees. Now children, we can say not all stakeholders are equal. Some stakeholders are less important to business than the other. The business would class them into two categories, that is primary and secondary stakeholders. Now let us look at what are they. Primary stakeholders such as owners, employees, creditors, dealers, suppliers and competitors. They have more frequent and closer interaction with the organization. People or group seen by the business to be vital to the organization's success or failure are termed as primary stakeholders. For a restaurant, a supplier may be considered a primary stakeholder as the entire reputation of that restaurant depends upon the quality of food from the supplier. Key primary stakeholders for all organizations are the owners, shareholders, the staff, managers, and the customers. Secondary stakeholders are the people or group who feel involved in the organization's success or failure, whether or not the management agrees. For example, are the local residents who may be affected by the traffic noise from deliveries or by pollution from smelly or smoky factories or firms. Some of the examples of secondary stakeholders are government, media, local community, and general public. Now, children, suppose you are about to open a restaurant in a small town. What are your primary and secondary stakeholders? Primary stakeholders in that case, customers living in the neighboring town, local farmers supplying meat, vegetables, dairy to the restaurant. Secondary stakeholders would include local journalists looking to write an article about the restaurant opening, local residents objecting to increased traffic and parking problems. Now, children, identify your stakeholders. Think of all the people who are affected by your business, who have influence or power over it, or have an interest in its successful or unsuccessful conclusions. That is, your boss, shareholders, government, senior executive, alliance partners, trade associations, your co-workers, suppliers, the press, your team, lenders, interest groups, customers, analysis. Then is the public, prospective customers, future recruits, the community, or your family. All of them are somewhere or the other involved into the decisions of the stakeholders. We need to identify as to what kind of stakeholders are they. Hope you have all enjoyed the video. The topics covered today are: number 1, meaning of stakeholders. What is the difference between stakeholders and shareholders? Difference between stakeholders and customers. Difference between shareholders and customers. Along with that, we have also discussed at length what do we mean by internal and external stakeholders, as well as primary and secondary stakeholders. Thank you. Have a good day ahead. Stay home and stay safe.